Hello fellow CNC nuts, and did you hear that? Hello fellow CNC nuts, and welcome. Today we're looking at 3D puzzles. Remember these here? You cut out all the pieces, you assemble it, and you're left with a little model here that you can play with if you so desire. But it's also a puzzle. Everything just sort of slots together, and if you pull it all apart, you can have the fun of putting it together. There really are some great models out here. Now, the model that I've got, well, actually more to the point, my brother got, it was from CNCnutz.com. He wants me to build him this. And this is going to be big because I'm not going to make this from small bits of MDF. I'm going to make this from 1/2-inch plywood. So this is going to end up quite large, 4 times larger than the basic model most people would make. Now ultimately the plan is to motorise it and have it run around his backyard at Christmas. Whether or not we manage to achieve that part of it will remain to be seen, but at the very least we should be able to get the model built, and it should be a lot of fun doing it. So without further ado, it's not going to build itself, so we better get on with it. Now the plan for this project came from here, www.CNCnutz.com. As you can see here, they have quite a range of different projects that you can cut out on your CNC machine or scroll saw and assemble. Some of them look really interesting indeed. In fact, I have a sneaking suspicion I've already spotted this Christmas's project. The plan that we settled on for our project is this one here, the steam locomotive. Now when you look through here you can see the train from various angles. It gives you a bit of information as well here on the screen about the locomotive itself. And here are the files that come with the plans. We have our DXF files here, which are the patterns we need to cut. We have here some copyright and other documentation. There's a notes here on what size the largest pieces, as well as what the approximate size of the overall train will be, depending on what material I cut it from. And also we have an assembly guide, which is incredibly helpful when assembling this project. So I'm cutting this project out of 12mm plywood. I've cut the sheets as wide as my table can hold, and having put the pieces on, I then go through and put smaller pieces on to fill up the gaps. The piece that's currently being cut is the largest piece in the entire project, and I wanted to get that out of the way first. It also forms part of the chassis, and I want to start building this thing from the bottom up. So getting the chassis made is my first priority. So that's our first cut complete, and what I've done is I've started by doing the longest piece on the train, and here it is here. The great thing about using the down cutting spiral bit is there's virtually no sanding required. It's almost finished when it comes out of the plywood, just the lightest sand and it's basically done. Now on here, this is where the wheels are going to go through, and because of the way I've scaled this, they will take a bearing like this here, which I can use to attach the wheels and make them run smoothly. Now at the very top end here you can see nothing's been cut out, and the idea behind that is I'm going to do this board in 2 separate files. The first one cuts these pieces here out, then I take the board off the table here, rotate it 180 degrees, put it back onto the table and run the second file. It'll cut the remaining pieces at this end of the table, and I don't need to tile the whole thing. because even though I am cutting this board, which is longer than my table, no individual piece is too big for me to cut. And by planning to use it that way, I save myself a lot of hassle. So with the material now turned 180 degrees and clamped back down to the table, reset the cutter back to the bottom left hand corner there, re-zeroed it to the table, and I've loaded up the new file, the file that should cut the parts into this area here. So let's see if it works. And there we have it, the second half of the cut's done. And as you can see, all these pieces here fitted in on the sheet in the remaining space. And that's just a great way of saving you from having to cut up an entire sheet. If I'd had to cut the sheet down into smaller pieces, I would not have got as an efficient layout on this board here, and I would have wasted a lot of material. By doing it this way, I avoid that wastage. It makes it a lot easier to lay out. Sure, it's a little bit more work when you have to make the files, but once they're made, it's no real problem to do. Speaking of files, it's really important that you scale your drawings to suit the material you're using. Whether you're making something as large as this or as small as this model here, you need to scale the drawing to suit the thickness of the material you're using. When you're making components like this here, some pieces slot into others. You have these slotted holes here and tabs on your other pieces. And determined by how thick this material is, what width this slot here has to be. If you make it too narrow, the piece won't go in. Make it too large, it'll be very sloppy and the whole thing will fall apart. You need to find that happy medium. Now the trick, of course, is to get your digital calipers out and measure how thick your material. You need to go around your plywood or whatever material you're using and measure the thickness, then average it out. In my case, the thickness material ranged from 12 millimeters to 12.7 millimeters, depending on where I was measuring. I've settled on 12.5 millimeters as a good average thickness of my stock. And so far, everything's working out all right. 12.5 also gets me around a couple of other issues that I was going to have when it comes to trying to mechanize this here later on. But it is important that you scale your material or your drawing to your material thickness. So we're going to have a look at that now. So let's take a wee look at our drawing here. If we look at these slots here, and I'll just select this one here to start with, and I come down to the bottom right here, I can see that it's 6 millimeters wide by 3 millimeters high. If I grab the slot here, I can see that it is 12 millimeters wide by 3 millimeters high. So clearly this drawing is designed to be cut using 3 millimeter material. Now ultimately I want to make this here to be used with 12.5 millimeter material, so I need to scale these slots so that they're 12.5 millimeters high. Now using a simple calculation, I know that that is an increase in size by 416.66666 recurring percent. So I can simply grab the entire drawing, come over here to scale, put in here 416.66666, apply, and if I select this slot here now, I'll see that it's 12.5 millimeters. Likewise this one here, again 12.5 millimeters here. Now that's nice and simple, but it does require a little bit of a calculation. Another method I like to use requires no calculation at all. Now I want to scale those slots that are 3mm in width or height. I'm going to use what I call the box method, and I'm going to simply draw a box around my stock. Now, to use this method, there are three critical items. First, the box must be larger than the item you're trying to scale. Second, the item you want to scale must be inside the box. And thirdly, one side of the box, and it doesn't matter which one it is, must bear a direct relationship to the item you want to scale. So for instance, in this case, I want to scale a 3mm side item in this box here. So I need to make one of the sides of my box and give it some sort of relationship to that 3mm. So I could make my box side 3 kilometers long, or I could make it 3 meters long, which is what I intend to do. I could make it 300mm long, but unfortunately that would put my box inside this item I'm trying to scale, so that won't work. So if I just come over here and put 3000 and apply that, and that's 3000mm is 3 meters. Now, this time I'm going to come here and I'm going to select the entire thing, my new box plus the item that's inside the box. And now I can simply scale this here, 3 meters. I'm going to go 12.5 meters. Now 12.5 meters is 12,500mm. Just apply that. And there we are. Everything that was inside that box is now scaled. If I click on here, look at that, we can see it's 12.5mm high. Again, come over here, 12.5, the slot down here, it's again 12.5mm. So that's an easy way of scaling it without having to work out what the percentage of scale it needs to be. Now this particular method works just as well with Imperial. Here's an Imperial version of the drawing, and I'll just click on here, and if we come down here we'll see the height of that slot is 0.125, and the slot here again 0.125 by half an inch wide, and over here this vertical slot again it's 0.125 by looks like about 3/4 of an inch. Now as I said, we're going to use the same process for this here, and if we draw a box around here, we need to make this box bear some relationship to the slot that we want to rescale. Now if you think about it, 0.125 is 125,000th of an inch. So if I make one of the sides of this box 125 inches, there's our direct relationship. So now we can scale this here. I'll select the box and the contents of that box and come here to where we do our scaling, and as you can see it's 125 inches. Imagine I want to make that slot 0.52 of an inch thick. That would be 520,000ths of an inch. So if I simply scale that to 520 inches, let's have a look and see how we did. I'm going to select one of these slots, come down here, and as you can see it's 0.52 of an inch. Take this vertical slot here, and again its width is 0.52 of an inch. So as you can see, this method works really well, no calculation required, and we need to do is draw a box around the entire project that you want to scale. So that's how I scale my drawings. How you choose to scale yours, I leave entirely up to you. Just one word of warning, if you are going to get a calculator out, work out what that scaling factor is, do ensure you put enough digits after the decimal point, otherwise you won't get a correctly scaled drawing. Especially if you're doing one that ends up with a recurring digit after the decimal point like I did. Mine was 416.66666 and so on. If I simply shorten that to 416.67, then I'll end up with the wrong answer. So just be warned, if you're going to scale it like that, just make sure you put plenty of digits after the decimal point. Now, if you use the box method, of course, then it's not an issue whether the answer's recurring or not. I think it's about time we cut some more plywood. So now, to give you an idea of where we're up to, I've now finished cutting a full sheet of plywood that's 8 by 4 foot at 1/2 inch thick. And believe it or not, I've still got 3/4 of a sheet of plywood yet to go. I've got this much of the train assembled, and I've got all these parts down here still to go on it. And like I said, there's still a heap more pieces yet to cut, which will complete next week and hopefully get the whole thing assembled. I was expecting to have issues because of the rounded corners of these slots when it comes to putting it together, but that hasn't been the case. Everything's just slipped together very nicely and I haven't had to worry about it too much at all. I'll put a link in the description box to where you can get either these plans or other plans. They actually have a whole range of them there, so have a good look through. You might find a 3D puzzle that takes your interest, and then if it's worth doing, it's worth overdoing, so why not make a larger scale model of it. I'll also put a link to my own website, www.cncnutz.com. In the meantime, thanks for watching, guys. Really appreciate you taking the time, and we'll catch up with you next week. Cheers.